Hi everyone, welcome back to Canary Cast. Don't forget, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and smash the like button too. That helps us out massively. Anyway, being the international break, we thought we'd better put some content out for you guys, and we thought what better than do a roundtable again, because it was so good last time. So this time we're joined by the voice of BBC Radio Norfolk even, Chris Goreham and Rob Butler. How are you, gents?
Hello chaps, we're good.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, boys. Thanks for asking us. I was just saying, I think people think me and Chris don't like each other because we don't often get asked to do these together. Maybe the odd time separately, but it's nice to be asked together, isn't it, Chris?
I think people worry that once we get going, that's it, and they won't get a word in on their own podcast. That's why they split us up. It's like when you're at school and you're not allowed to sit next to your best mate because you talk too much.
Yeah.
No, you talk as much as you want. No one's here to listen to Jacob, lads, so you talk as much as you want.
A bit harsh. He's got a lovely sweater on, by the way. You cold in your house?
Thank you, mate. I appreciate it. I thought I'd try and get myself to stand out a little bit. Obviously, of course, with you big names, I thought, right, let's get a big kind of jumper out to kind of stand out a little bit more.
That's lovely, mate. Very nice.
Thanks, mate.
Okay, so what we're going to do, the first 20 minutes, half an hour is going to be football chat. We'll talk about how the season started for Norwich, what the lads think of transfer business, that sort of stuff. And then the second half will be more of a casual chat around how Chris and Rob have found COVID football and all sorts of stuff like that. So, gents, let's kick off. Chris and Rob, what have you made of the start of the season so far? How do you think Norwich have fared? Is there anything that you've learned about the team in the first 3 games? Because I think it's quite interesting. We've played a nice spectrum of teams across sort of championship ability. A poorer team, Alex Neil's Preston just outside the playoffs, and then a fellow relegated team. So I think it gives us a chance to gauge where Norwich are at. So let's go Rob first. Rob, what have you made of the season so far?
Good question. I think I expected a bit more from Norwich, if I'm honest. I think the points that we've got is fine. I think it was a really good win at Huddersfield. I think it was an excellent performance in the second half there. And also, it wasn't too bad against Preston. As you said, they're a pretty good side. They're well organised. Good old Alex Neil. We still love him. He always puts a good team out. It was disappointing at Bournemouth. We played all right. We had a bit of possession and it was okay. But we just didn't really look in it to me. And we didn't look like we had enough ideas. And, of course, the people who kind of defend it would say, well, this is Bournemouth, a team that came down with us. They've still got lots of good players, and they're kind of a Premier League team. They've been there for a long time, but I think Norwich just look a bit disjointed, and I think that is a bit of a worry. I think the players that have come in, there's lots of interesting ones. I think Paqueta, the Polish winger, I think he certainly he's got something about him, but we haven't quite seen it. I'm really pleased he scored against Preston because that gets him off the mark. I'm interested into why Jordan Hugill hasn't been playing. I think that's an interesting one. Obviously, Pookie's actually made a pretty good start to the season, but Jordan Hugill was the big new signing, and we were all excited about that one. The new Grant Holt, etc., and we've not seen him. He's had a couple of cameos, and that's it. So all in all, I'd say 6 out of 10. I think there's a lot of upheaval going on at the football club at the minute. I think Daniel Farker really showed that in our post-match interview last week after the game, that he is so frustrated with the transfer window. He's probably frustrated with players who he thought were going to be here and kicking on, like Buendia and Cantwell, who obviously aren't, who should find the championship quite straightforward, but they haven't. They haven't even hardly featured yet. So I would say 6 out of 10. Much more room for improvement. Quite disappointed, but not like it's not beyond the realms of bringing it back.
Yeah. Chris, what have you made of it?
Yeah, I'd agree with most of what Rob has said. I think the performances, we haven't played well, I would say, yet. There have been encouraging signs in some games, but we've looked a bit like a team that is finding its way after relegation. The encouragement I have taken is that, particularly in that Huddersfield game and the Preston game as well, that there was a determination to roll the sleeves up and get stuck in and grind out points, even though the performance wasn't at its best on the pitch. And I think that's what you need in the Championship, first and foremost, before you can start talking about beating teams 4 and 5-0, as on our day we probably have got the talent to do. That's not going to happen until you've got to grips with the Championship, rolled your sleeves up and got stuck in. And there was a determination to do that in the first couple of games, which I was really pleased with, because you never know when a set of players has come down from the Premier League how up for the Championship that they're going to be. So I've certainly taken encouragement from that. I've not seen anything like what I would call Norwich anywhere near their best at the moment. So there's plenty of room for improvement. But I don't think you can underestimate the upheaval and just how unsettled it must be in that dressing room at the moment. Players who have left, players who haven't left but have been, very firmly linked with other clubs. Max Aarons and Barcelona being a great example. Don't underestimate the effect that must have on the dressing room when you're sat there before a game looking around and you're not sure who wants to be there or who's going to be there next week. It must be really, really unsettling. So I think the club made the decision, and I didn't hear too many people disagreeing with it, to stick with Daniel Farke at the end of last season, to bring in lots of new players for him to work with. Having made that decision, I think you've now just got to be patient and give it a bit of time. Yes, we want to see performances soon, but there are many reasons why we probably haven't had them yet.
Yeah, I think me and both of you seem to be in the same boat here. We're sort of slightly optimistic, but we know that we haven't reached top gear yet. Someone that isn't that optimistic is Jacob. Jacob has lost his head a bit, I'm going to be honest. Jacob's quite worried about this season. Go on, Jacob, lay your cards on the table. What's your beef?
Joe's setting me up, gents, to make me look a bit of a foolish fan, but I'll try and make it as kind of, reason why. I think it's, at the moment it screams a bit of a transition season, which I don't think we're fully really wanting, simply because Webber leaves next season. Imagine if we're still in the Championship when he leaves. Realistically, has he done a better job than David McNally, for example, you could say? In terms... Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, good question.
You could look at that and say, is the ambition there? He's come out and said multiple times that we haven't got to sell. I know that the lure of the big clubs, the Premier League clubs, if they want them, they'll get them. But you look at it and say, is our squad now strong enough? Do we have to scramble around for players? For me, it's a little bit more hectic than what we've been used to in the last couple of seasons, with everything being planned out. Right, we've got these players in, these players are staying. At the moment, it looks a little bit muddled, and I'm not too sure where, like Chris said, where the players' heads are at. It just seems a little bit more unplanned and not fully kind of in focus as what I personally thought it was going to be coming up to the end of the transfer window.
What do you make of that, Laz? You think he's got a point?
Yeah, I think he definitely has. I understand it's never nice when you're seeing players leave the club, and Rob's mentioned this a few times. We're used to it as Norwich City supporters, that the players you fall in love with and the players that you think about getting the names on the back of your shirt, that they do leave. And I think whether it's ambition of the club or not, I think we've got to face facts. This is what is going to happen to a club like Norwich City. If you get a player who becomes too good for you too quickly, like a Ben Godfrey, then Jamal Lewis, another example already, then they are going to go. And it's not just a Norwich City thing. You look at Leicester City, since they won the Premier League all those years ago, look at the players they've lost. Mahrez, Kante left straight after, didn't he? Danny Drinkwater was a big member of that team. They sold him. More recently, Ben Chilwell's gone, Harry Maguire, even clubs at that level who've won the Premier League. Once bigger clubs come in and offer lots and lots of money, they find they can't stand in players' way. So yes, from a fan's point of view, it's disappointing when those players leave, but I think you're much better as a football club not grimly holding on to these players and thinking, well, we'll just keep them, because they're going to go at some point. So you're much better having a plan as to, right, if this player goes, who's going to come in? And that's the test. Have Norwich got those players who can come in and fill the voids that have been left by this transfer window? Because the players that are often referred to as the crown jewels at the moment, Godfrey, Max Aarons and co, were all here when Stuart Webber and Daniel Farke came to the club. And the two of those deserve massive credit for the way they've turned them from promising youngsters into excellent first-team footballers. But now they've been here for 3 years and more. We now need to see the young players that they've been working on, the players that they've been bringing to the club, coming in and filling the void. And let's face it, becoming the next 15, 20 million pound stars. That's the reality for a club like Norwich City. And even if we were in the Premier League and we had a rich owner with lots of money behind us, you would still find that Everton, Liverpool, Barcelona might want your players, and they would still go. So you would have to have a plan to fill the void when they went, and that's what we're really going to see over the next few months, how well that plan has worked.
I think at the minute you're absolutely right. We're seeing our big players that getting their head turned left, right, and centre. What have you made, Rob, of how some players have handled it better than others? I'm thinking Max Aarons is being linked with big clubs and has been for a few weeks now, and he's still putting in decent performances. The others aren't so much. What have you made of how the club and Daniel Farke and the players themselves have handled all these rumours, really?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think it's important to say that we don't know what's gone on behind the scenes, so we can't possibly comment on it. We don't know what's transpired. The only information we have is what Daniel Farke said in his post-match interview at Bournemouth. The only other information we have is, some digs at Todd Cantwell at the end of last season from various quarters, including some fans, I must admit. And I'm not happy with necessarily how some people talk about Todd Cantwell. I think, having spoke to him, and I know Chris has as well over the years, he is a Norwich boy, he's a Norfolk boy, he's a Dereham boy, he's a Norwich fan. He grew up at the club, he's got a long association with the club. We've all seen the picture of him as a little boy. And for people to kind of say, oh, he doesn't really care, or he's not bothered, or he's more worried about his image, that's just nonsense. It's just not true. So I can understand why Daniel Farke said it. This is why I'm quite in the middle on this one, I'm afraid. So I haven't really got any strong opinions on either way. I can see if Daniel Farke thinks they haven't trained hard enough, and they haven't put the work in training, and they haven't rolled their sleeves up like Max Aarons and Ben Godfrey have, then that's fine. I understand that, and that's a perfectly good reason for him not to be included in the squad. However, there's other things that have gone on around this, and I've seen quite a lot of stuff on social media, and people have been tagging me in and saying, and I talked about it on the scrimmage as well, calling Todd names and just being quite abusive. And you think, this is a lad who's a Norwich fan. This is a lad who grew up in Dereham. He's not here for the money. He's not here just to kind of, as a stepping stone to another club. He's a Norfolk boy. And to see our own fans actually atting him in on tweets and kind of abusing him, it's a head scratcher. It really is. Todd Cantwell's a top player. He's going to play in the Premier League. He might even play for England. He's already been capped at youth levels and what have you. He's got a bit of something about him. He's got a bit of arrogance, a bit of confidence. That's just how he is, because he's that kind of player. He believes in himself. You see on his Instagram, he's constantly putting, stuff about how confident he is in his ability and how he believes in it. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with a player who actually believes in himself? Nothing. Same with Buendia. We all know he got sent off at the end of last season, and it was a bit annoying, and we're all kind of like, oh, what's he doing there? But that's the kind of player he is. He has got that something extra. Any player with a little bit of genius has got that in them. So, to put a nutshell around it, I can totally understand what Farke's saying. I support him in that as a Norwich fan. I've got nothing but respect for Daniel Farke as a head coach. He's done a brilliant job for us. But when it goes further than that, and people are really starting to dig out Todd Cantwell and Emi Buendia, I think it's too much. And I really have got a lot of confidence that they will be back in the fold soon. There would have been cuddles and socially distanced cuddles and stuff at Coney. Everything will be forgiven, and I hope they're back in the team soon, because we need those two players. They're top players for us.
I think one point worth making, is that don't forget Todd Cantwell did start the first two games of the season, so it's not like he's come down from the Premier League and everyone's gone, oh, he doesn't fancy it. He picked him at Huddersfield and he got stuck in. Remember the elbow he left in on Richard Stearman's moments before he made the mistake. Preston, I didn't get his best game, but he was there putting it in, and then it was after that game he disappeared from the team. So this isn't a player who's come down from the Premier League and Daniel Farke has gone, well, Tom Tribal, Josip Jermic, we don't fancy you in the Championship. He did to begin with. So it's what's happened in between those games, I think, that is maybe we'll never know.
Jacob, I'll bring you in on this, because whilst you obviously haven't been abusing him, you have been vocal on Cantwell. And just to give you an opportunity to sort of fight your cause, mate, because you have been sort of negative on Cantwell so far.
Yeah, so for the kind of backstory, Rob and Chris, I will only criticise Todd on his performance. I completely agree that talk about his image, his kind of sponsorship, his Instagram, whatever. That's just how he is. He's allowed to be a free spirit. Everyone's different. That's what makes the world go round, etc. For me, his first last season, I thought he was up there with player of the season. The way he developed was absolutely incredible, and I've said this before. For me, he was by far the most developed player. He hit a peak that I thought I didn't expect him to get to be honest, in that Premier League season. But since we've come back down, for me, in the first couple of games, he hasn't really looked at it. And I remember against Preston, we were 2-1 down, and I did make a little slight infamous video about how he was just walking. I was quite passionate after the game that I didn't really feel like he was coming for the ball. He was hiding at times. And
Jake, hang on, can I just say, you can pick out. I mean, come on, you can pick out moments when players are walking anywhere on the pitch. And if you want
not a 2-1 down though, Rob, not a 2-1 down when we need someone to get the game.
It could have been anything. He could have just been walking back, and just happen to just be taking that couple of breaths that you need to do, and then off he goes again. I mean, we don't need to get the stats out, but I'm sure he ran as many kilometres as every other player on that pitch. So I don't understand this kind of. Todd Cantwell's a top player. I don't understand why Norwich fans and football fans are always looking for someone to put the boot in on. And unfortunately, at the minute, it's Todd Cantwell. I just don't get it.
He's not a scapegoat for me personally. He's not a scapegoat in terms of generally, but in that performance, from my fans' perspective, I've paid £10 to watch that game. He's not giving me my £10 value, in my opinion. Okay. And if he was playing well, I'd be happy. It's not like, Todd Cantwell, I've got to be on him every game, because that, like you say, that's not fair. I'll look at it from a game-to-game perspective. And for me, at the moment, he's not giving everything that he did last season. That's just my opinion. And you've got yours, which is absolutely fine.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I just don't think his head's fully at it at the moment. And that's, well, Daniel Farke's kind of alluded to that in his comments as well, that his head's not fully there and not maybe as mature as Max Aarons, who's 2 years younger than him. So at the end of the day, I don't think he's fully at it at the moment. Hopefully he does. And hopefully I can eat my words at the end of the season and say, you know what, he didn't start brilliantly, but he's finished and taken us up to the Premier League again.
Rob's right. Cantwell does get a lot of stick from the Norwich fan base, especially when you consider he's a local lad. But Chris, do you think it's because he's a local lad that we put sort of more expectation on Todd's shoulders? Do you think that's fair to say?
I'm not sure it's expectation. I think people want him to do well because he's a local lad, because we love to have one of our own. I think this is just symptomatic of a team that hasn't won a lot of games and hasn't scored a lot of goals in the year 2020. You know, the way Norwich were relegated, we knew last season was going to be tough, but the way they went down after the lockdown and the results they had, the performances they put in, it was so underwhelming, wasn't it? It was so disappointing the way they got relegated. I think when results go like that, all the players leave themselves open to any sort of criticism from fans who are disappointed, and it should never get personal. But a lot of the performances in the latter part of that season were not good enough, and we know players are capable of so much better. And Todd Cantwell's had his fair share. I think I don't think he's been a scapegoat, because I think there are others. Yes, no longer around the first team. There are other players who've paid a higher price than Todd Cantwell for relegation for the Premier League in terms of what their reputation is. So yeah, he's a talented player, and I think you made a really good point a moment ago that if you look through that Norwich squad that started the Premier League season, how many players do you think actually performed in the Premier League either as well as you thought they would or better than you thought they would? And I would say probably Tim Krul and Todd Cantwell are the only two. If you take out the first few games of Timu Pukki, everybody else has come back down to the Championship thinking, I didn't really make my mark there. But Cantwell and Tim Krul, I thought, were the two that absolutely did in the Premier League.
I think it's important to say as well, you boys have obviously seen it as well, but me and Chris have seen too many Premier League relegations, and it's easy for fans and what have you to just say, let's sell those good players and use that money to bring in other ones. We got lucky with Maddison. Well, lucky's probably the wrong word. We did a great job after Maddison, and we came back from that because he was a magnificent player, still is, and we managed to recover from that brilliantly. So that's an anomaly. But I think usually what we've found over the years is when you sell the best players, your Cantwells, your Godfreys, your Jamal Lewis's, your Buendias, whoever they are, you don't always replace them, and you end up going, your whole squad will go down a peg. And that's the problem. We saw it when Norwich first went down. All those great players that we had, Darren Eadie, etc. Eventually they all went. Keith O'Neill later on, Bellamy, and we never really replaced them. We didn't have those stars coming through. We got lots of money for them. Bella's, I think, was 7 million, which was a lot of the time. Yeah. But never ever replaced them for many years, and we had that long, dull run where we just weren't doing anything, and Worthy finally got us up. So, it's the players are already in to replace the ones they're selling. Are they going to be good enough? Watch this space.
Okay, chaps, let's talk about Ben Godfrey, because it's pretty newsworthy at the minute. Seems that he is imminently off to Everton. 25 plus 5. Are you happy with that, Chris? Is that a fair amount, do you think?
Oh, it's so difficult to say, isn't it? I think the way football transfer fees are now, and what you see some players going for, Harry Maguire, we saw him go for 80-odd million a couple of summers ago, didn't we? So, yeah, I think if Norwich City are the best judges of that, it depends what the add-ons are and what he would have to do to actually make those come true. So, yeah, I'd rather have Ben Godfrey in the team from a fan's point of view, but I do understand that if a Premier League club comes in with what the club regards as an acceptable offer and the player wants to go, then he's going to go. So yeah, I'm not one to get too bogged down on transfer fees, because having looked at clubs' accountants over the years, there always tends to be more to it than the headline figure that we always want. We always want to know, how much did we get for so and so? Well, so much of it is paid in instalments, and so much of it depends on, well, if he does this, you'll get that, and if he scores a goal with his left foot, you can have another 100,000, and if he plays for England on his Tuesday, you can have another 500,000. It's nearly as complicated as the COVID rules, some of these these transfer deals we have now. So you never get to the bottom of them fully. You just got to trust that the club has got itself in a position where it doesn't need to sell. It's got players tied down to long contracts, and that means that it can get the maximum amount of money that it possibly can. Whether it turns out to be good business or not, well, it all depends, as we've said already, how they replace him. If Ben Gibson comes in and is the player we hope he will be, then yeah, it'll look like good business. But if they struggle, if they go through another season of central defensive injury crisis, then we'll be wishing we had him, because you can't put a £25 million note in the centre of your defence, can you?
No, you certainly can't. Rob, you said watch this space in terms of how our sort of new recruits fare this season. Now that we've lost Godfrey, do you think we're okay at centre back, or do you think we're a bit short?
Good question. We're not sure if they're all fit, but the problem is, arguably our best centre half and the club captain, Grant Hanley, who is a brilliant bloke, he just has unlucky with injuries, isn't he? He can't stay fit. So, we hope that he can have a long period of fitness. Zimbo's reliable and doesn't ever let us down, and we know how good he is in the championships. There's no issues there. Tim Close is another one, unfortunately, very injury prone. So we're all kind of hoping that, as Chris said, I agree with everything he said. We're all hoping that Ben Gibson is the Ben Gibson who nearly got in the England squad, rather than the one that the Burnley fans didn't rate at all. It's big on his shoulders. I'm sure he'll be fine. It's the championship, so he's dropping down. I'm the same as Chris. Transfer fees are, that's for the club to worry about. It's not for fans to worry about. I find it strange, but I understand it when you see fans go, oh, good business, and that's a great fee. But that doesn't. You've lost a good player. For fans, you've lost a top player in Ben Godfrey. And that's a pill to swallow, and when he's not going to be replaced. You can't replace a player like Ben Godfrey, because he's going to go on to play for England. That, in my opinion, I think he's a top player. He's going to a great club in Everton. And is 25 million too much? I don't know. Like Chris said, it's not Football Manager. I don't know. I don't know if that's too much, too little, whatever. But we know, and to be fair to the club, as much as we've talked about owners putting money in, etc., the club have been 100% transparent with where we are. They say we're a self-funding club. They say we need to sell in order to put that money back in to run the club. You can't argue. If that's what they're telling us, that's what they're saying. And I think when Robert Chase was in charge of the club and we were selling lots of stars, it was a bit different, because there seemed to be a bit more cloak and dagger with it all. But with this regime, the one thing you can say about them is they do try to be honest with fans and say, look, we'll lay it on the line and tell you how it is. So we knew the big players were going to leave. They have left, a couple of them already, and that's where we're at. But it's a tough one to say whether we're well covered, because we haven't seen Ben Gibson play for Norwich yet. So we'll wait to see that, I think.
Yeah, agreed. There's certainly a lot of hype around Ben Gibson. Hopefully he lives up to it. Jacob, I'll just come to you quickly on Godfrey. Chris made the point that last season you can only really say Cantwell and Krul were really stepped up to it. And to be honest, I agree with that. Godfrey was okay. He wasn't terrible. But do you see him going to Everton and now improving and sort of solidifying himself as a Premier League centre-half?
Yeah, mate, I think it's easy to forget that he's only been in our first team for a year and a half as centre-back. And the progression he's made to be a £25 million player is incredible, really, for Everton to want to pay that. And Carlo Ancelotti, who's a manager who knows what he's talking about and has seen it and done it all before, for him to say, yeah, that's my number one target after a couple of mishaps. I think you've got to praise him, really, and say he's given everything to the club. He did well last season at times. I think, he did get caught out a couple of times, but that's the Premier League. You get punished for those errors, and it was his first season there. I think he'll only improve under Carlo Ancelotti, mate. And I think, like Rob and Chris were saying, that really I would not be surprised to see him improve and get into that England reckoning, which would be great to see for a Norwich point of view, to kind of see a player we've developed to get to that stage. It's just a shame he's not doing that with Norwich, really.
Yeah, it certainly would be nice. Imagine him and Max Aarons in an England shirt in the future. That would be quite the thing for the club. That'd be
Todd
great.
as well.
Yeah,
and you could have like Jacob. You could have Gary Lineker. You go, look, he's just walking there. Look.
It's just not good enough, Rob. It's just not good enough. What's he doing?
Right. Okay.
About what Instagrams he's going to do later on. I think at that point he's like, what can I do?
His music video. Can I retweet? Yeah. Anyway. Okay, excellent. Let's park that there, and let's have a little chat around football and COVID, because you're two of the best placed blokes to speak to about it. You're obviously one of the lucky ones. You're still going to the game. If a normal match day experience is 10 out of 10, how does this COVID football compare?
Oh, for me, it's no more than a 2 or 3. It's been, I've really not enjoyed it at all, and I feel really guilty for saying that, because to some extent, I've been very lucky. I've been to all the games at Carrow Road since lockdown came in. I've been to a couple of the away games as well. I've not missed out on watching Norwich City play football. But one thing that we've always tried to do, actually, on the radio with myself and Rob, with the programme we do called The Scrimmage, having grown up as Norwich fans, we've always realised that when you support a team like Norwich, what happens on the pitch is just a tiny part of the story. You know, the reason we're here doing a podcast now and talking so much about football isn't just because we like watching Norwich play on the pitch. It's the relationships you form along the way, the experiences you have with it. Last time Norwich got promoted, and it was just about done when Leeds lost at Brentford. I remember celebrating with Rob at Cawley Services because we were on the way back from Stoke, and it's when you find yourself in these unusual positions where you're high-fiving and hugging other Norwich fans you've never met before at a service station, and that's what football's about. It's about the relationships you make along the way, and turning up at Carrow Road and not seeing the usual friendly faces in the press room, which is closed at the moment, not chatting to the fans we usually see on the way into the game. Even the away matches, myself and Rob, we're not travelling together at the moment. We're not allowed to. We're not allowed to share a car under the guidelines, and it's just such a soulless experience. It really, really is. So I feel really guilty for saying it because I'm lucky. I've got to go to a lot of football matches, but you're not missing it. You're not missing anything. The way football is at the moment, you wouldn't want to be there because it's not the same.
Rob, it's just not the same without the fans, is it?
No, I totally agree with everything. I mean, me and Chris have had many heart-to-hearts on air and off air, about how this isn't football. It just isn't football. I mean, football is about the fans. Whether you're going to watch Wroxham and Diss or Norwich and Man United, football needs fans there, and it's what makes it. I've only been back to Carrow Road once. The rest of Chris and Phil have been doing the commentaries, and as Chris said, only one of us can go with a pundit. So I went back to Carrow Road for the first time last week against Preston, and it was a little bit better because there were 1,000 fans there, which was great, and it was lovely to see those smiling faces, and I stood and watched as the fans came in, and it was exciting. Ben Kensel was there as well, and you could tell how proud he was, of the club being able to do this, and he said to me, we were so keen to do it for these fans because we know that football's not the same without it. So I think credit to Norwich City for recognising that. But yeah, I mean, I struggle to watch it on telly. I mean, I do. I still watch it because it's football, but I've really struggled. I quite enjoyed the Champions League because that was great football. But it's really hard watching football without fans on the telly. I hate the piped in sound. I think that's just awful. I enjoyed the cricket. That worked quite well, but I think Chris made a good point. It's because we don't go to England Test matches every week, so it is a bit of a novelty if you're there. So actually watching it on telly is what you're used to. I think F1 works all right. I've watched a bit of that, believe it or not. I know I've even become an F1 fan, but football is just 10% of what it is without fans. Even when we do the phone-in after a game, it's kind of, the old joke is, I couldn't get to the game, but this is what I think, and everyone's saying that, even fans like Spud and all these great names, that will literally go to anything. I mean, Spud will literally go to the most random of youth games, and we heard a story from him the other day. He's that much of a Norwich fan. He's getting down about it now. My old mate Spud, he's actually getting quite sad about the fact he can't go to football. And I think lots of Norwich fans feel like that. And I think it's important to say that it's good that we're safe. It's good that we're staying safe. But the sooner we can get fans back into football is the sooner that football will come back. Because at the minute, it just doesn't feel real. And, if we do go up this season and there's no fans there to see it, I mean, that would just be awful. So, yeah, I don't know what to say, really. I agree with Chris. 1 out of 10, it's just poor. It really is.
It's almost the worst thing. It hits you every time. Is that you don't have to queue to even just drive onto the car park on a match day, and that doesn't. It's like just going to Tesco's or something, and it doesn't feel right. Yeah, as much as it's easier for us because we can just drive on. Being there amongst the fans and seeing them all in their kits and that build up to the game, it's not the same without it. And the commentary, I've made this joke before, but when you're doing commentary on the radio, so much of it is riding the crowd noise and rising your voice above it or letting the crowd speak for itself. And without the crowd, you are just a man next to a field shouting, and that's all I've been reduced to. That's what happens when you don't have the crowd, and I don't like it at all.
But I love it that I noticed it with Phil and you both doing your commentaries. I think it's easy for you, Chris, because you're kind of done it a lot longer and you've done hundreds and hundreds of games. But I spoke to Phil Daly about it, and he said he just feels a bit conscious of everyone looking at him. I'm sure you feel the same. And you're kind of shouting for it's in, and the 3 goals or whatever Norwich scored after lockdown, and then he said like everyone just sort of glares at you, and you're like, well, what do you think I'm doing, mate? I'm here on the radio. And I've had that. I've reported from like boxing matches and local football as well, and you do feel like that at those sort of venues because there's only 100 people there and everyone's looking at you, and you feel really conscious. But to do it at a Premier League ground and actually feel so conscious that everyone's staring at you, it must just be so weird. So, I've a couple of times, the game I did last week at Carrow Road, I had my cans on and I was sort of getting all worked up as I do on Canary Call, and like Phil was going, keep it down, you're going a bit over the top there, mate, because everyone can hear you. You just echo around the whole building. It's really weird.
That's really interesting, actually. Chris, have you had to change your commentary in any way because of how, you haven't got an audience at Carrow Road? So do you have to change your commentary style at all for the people at home?
Well, I don't think Norwich have scored any goals without a crowd at Carrow Road yet, because at least we had the 1,000 in last week. So, I think you do. I think you really do, because you can't go over the top. And so much of the reason you raise your voice when you're commentating a lot of the time is the excitement on the pitch, but it's the excitement on the pitch that has then caused the crowd to get on the edge of their seats and lift the noise. And then to make yourself heard on the radio, you've got to go above that. So if you've got Onel Hernandez breaking away on the right-hand side, he's one-on-one, and you can see he's got clear field in front of him, you don't start shouting because you don't need to, because everyone can hear you. So I think that's you don't maybe make a conscious decision to change your commentary style, but it just happens because you're not reacting to what's around you when you see the possibility of a goal coming.
Yeah. Okay, Jake, I'll come to you for sort of a last word on COVID football. As a fan, the experience at the minute, it's not great, is it? What have you made of the whole pay a tenner for iFollow and sit on your sofa and watch it?
Yeah, it's just not great, is it, mate? Like it was all. I remember we were talking about it when kind of lockdown came out and the football was back, and I said to you, didn't I? I just don't enjoy it. It's just not the same at all. Like, I know it was a Premier League we were losing anyway. That always doesn't help, but it's just not the same. Even now, like I think that's why we're probably more passionate in our videos and etc. Just trying to get passionate about something. That's what I wanted to ask Rob. Actually, do you think the callers are kind of getting a little bit more passionate or a little bit more upbeat with certain players or whatever, just because they've got no kind of match to go to? They need something to kind of vent at even more.
We've had lots of calls, I must admit. I feel as if, and this is credit to Chris and his brilliant commentary, I feel as if, and Phil, I've got to say as well, bless him, I feel as if there's more people listening during lockdown, and that's probably because there is, because perhaps we're the only way. If let's be honest, Radio Norfolk, we have a lot of older listeners, and they don't know iFollow from whatever, so that they might not know how to use it, and they just put their radios on. They switch their radios on, they listen in, and they love our commentaries, and Chris and Phil do a great job. And I feel when I'm sitting there doing the phoning that lots more people do get in touch because, like you say, they want to get worked up about something. And, obviously, we'll probably talk about Canary Call later, but obviously, when Norwich lose, we get more calls. I think that's pretty obvious for everyone because people, especially us Norfolk people, we love a good moan, don't we? So people love ringing in, they love moaning. And I agree with you. It's a great point, Jacob. I think people are getting more passionate because they're sat at home with a cup of tea and some popcorn, watching it on a stream that they've paid a tenner for. When you're at the game, you're living it. You're physically feeling it. You're heading. I mean, we're all doing that when the corner's coming over. We're all shouting at the ref. We're all kicking off with opposition players and booing or whatever. You can do it at home, but it's not the same. You sound a bit of a Charlie. So I think you're right. I think I found on the phoning that people do get worked up, but that's what we love. That's what all great football phonings are, whether it be 606, or Canary Call. That's what we want. And I will never, ever, even if I completely disagree with people, if they come on the phone in and get worked up and passionate and thump the desk, that's what we want. I think you've made a great point there. I think people are getting really passionate because you just can't get passionate in your own front room, can you?
Canary Call has produced some brilliant moments over the years. Hilarious. Are there any that particularly stick out to either of you?
Well, Chris is never there. He's always speaking to the manager, aren't you, Chris?
That's
you've
right.
done recently, haven't you? Actually.
Yeah. Well, last season, because of the rules that were in place, we weren't allowed to go and do the post-match interviews, were we? Because we were leaving that to Match of the Day and our BBC colleagues who were totally COVID secure. So I joined you for a few of them last year. I really enjoyed it. There wasn't a lot of Norwich success to talk about, which in some ways makes the post-match take on its own energy of its own, doesn't it? So yeah, I enjoyed it, but I think you're the one to answer any favourite Canary Call moments you've had, because I always hear about them second hand from you on the way home in the car.
There's so many. I mean, there's if you actually search on the BBC website under the Canary Call sort of branding, you can find some classic clips which are pretty good. I've sort of haven't had a few for a while, but I think it's just the characters. Obviously, Pammy was a famous one with her Gret old bird, as she called it. She had a big canary. For those who don't know, Pammy is a brilliant character who lives in Rowton, right near where. I won't name the Norwich legend she lives near, just in case. But someone who's very known in North Norfolk, and she basically, when the buses go past on their way to Norwich, she stands outside with a green and yellow shawl on, waving an inflatable canary. And for some reason, she just started phoning up, which is great. I think or we might have heard about her, and then we said, ring in, Pammy, and she did. And she's just brilliant. She's I think by her own admission a bit mad, and absolutely fine with that. She was great. She's a fantastic character and just hilarious. We had Brian on quite regularly. I still see Brian. He always used to write a song and sing a song. I remember a famous one being top of the league at Portman Road, which kind of went viral in Norfolk, which was nice. Lots of people loved that. And then you just get the random ones. I think some of the favourites are like some bloke came on saying about Andrew Cross when we had him and how we should be playing him. He's a great midfielder. What he scores goals. He's rough and ready. And we'd sold him, about 3 weeks before. And you're just scratching your head going, is this for real? It's really great fun. I love doing it, and I love the Norfolk people. And, as I say, anyone we have on, whoever they are, whether I disagree with them, agree with them, love them, hate them, whatever, and I certainly don't hate them, they're all welcome, because that's what makes a phone-in great, is the characters. And I know lots of people think it's just the same people every week. It really isn't. We make sure we give everyone a chance. Anyone who phones in gets an opportunity. Young, old, male, female, of course. Any walk of life. There'll probably be something classic on this one against Derby. There'll probably be a classic the week after. There's always something happening on Canary Call, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, we laugh, but it is an important service for the county, especially at the moment with no one at the ground, bar those lucky 1,000. What I'd like to do next, gents, I thought, because you've covered hundreds, if not thousands, of games together, if not on your own. Have you got any idea of how many games you have actually covered for Radio Norfolk?
No.
No.
We've just talked about this because there are journalists, quite a lot, and good luck to them, who count. And you'll get they go, it's my 10,000th game today. And you're like, I'm the same as Chris. I ain't got a clue, mate. I have not got a clue. I mean, we could probably roughly work it. I mean, Chris has obviously done way more than me. He's done another 10 years. But
I probably started commentating all the away games in 2005. So, to begin with, I was just doing the away games. And then, so it's just 15 years and however many games that is. You could probably work out a ballpark figure from that. Goodness knows how many days of my life I've spent on the motorway. Yeah.
Can you remember your first game, either of you?
First game was working or
working? Yeah, working.
The first game I properly commentated on for Radio Norfolk, sitting in for good old Roy Waller, was a game at Preston. Funnily enough, Roy got to the point where he was choosing his games carefully. He didn't fancy Preston away for some reason. I think he was comparing a country music gig that evening, so he couldn't get back from Preston in time. I went with Neil Adams, commentated with him for the first time, and Norwich won the game 2-1. I think David Neilson and Paul McVeigh scored. So that would have been in about 2001, that sort of time, 2002, something like that.
Yeah, my first one, I'm just looking it up. The first time I did Canary call, pretty sure, was a home game against Manchester United. We lost 2-1. You probably remember it, 2012, 26th of February 2012. Yeah. And that was when Giggs' 900th appearance. Yeah, and that was a blow. We played really well that day. I remember we equalised, didn't we? Grant Holt equalised. Yeah. And then Giggsy got a really sporty goal right at the end. And we used to have a little studio up in the corner just behind the snake pit, which is ironically where I used to sit. So I'd be in the snake pit, then I'd kind of run up. And Matthew Gudgeon was our presenter then, good old Gudge. And I just came in, and honestly, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't have a clue about anything to do with working a desk. It was kind of done remotely, the desks and all that, and the faders, and there was some equipment up there. But I remember just being terrified about the ending, because me and Chris every day now do programs where you're working to timings. You have to make sure you shut up at a certain time. You're waiting for jingles to come in or what have you. And I just kind of got to the end, and I had about 30 more seconds. So it's almost like, and for tea tonight, I'm going to have steak and chips. And anyway, that's the end. Goodbye. Like that. So because I was a total novice when it came to radio, I'd come from the TV side of things. So it was very nerve wracking, but it obviously went well. And, I did more. And that's thanks to the likes of Chris and Matt Gudgeon and David Clayton, who took a chance on a big gob like me. And here I am. But and I remember the first away one I did was actually Man United as well. We did it. Chris was there, and we did. It was me and Paul McVeigh, and because we had a little spell where I used to just come to away games with Chris, and not really do a lot. I just kind of came to watch, if I remember rightly, and I just sort of kept him company, and that was it. And then they said, "Oh, you might as well do Canary Call if you're there." So we did, and the rest is history, as they say.
Are there any days that stick in your mind about just a bad day at the office? Either because the performance was awful, or you had a shot for yourself?
We'll be here all day, I tell you. We've got loads. Where should we start, Chris? What about Old Trafford was one when the line went. Was it not far before kickoff? I think. Do you remember that one?
Oh yes, we've had a few of those. Those nervous moments where you're desperately trying to connect to the studio, and the build up, the program's already started, and you're not on the air yet, and you're trying to find someone who can technically make it all work. Those are always the worst moments. I think as much as we love the job, it is the times where Norwich get an unkind kickoff. I remember coming back with a Newcastle away game, didn't we? You remember this? We had a Newcastle away game, and it was the 4:00 kickoff on Sky, and it meant that Rob and I spent our Sunday evening. We didn't get away until about 7:30. And we were kind of really late Sunday night. And I think you had to be somewhere Monday morning, didn't you?
Yeah, I had to go. I'll tell you the full story. I had to go to Sky with my colleague friend Joe Drury. We had to go down to Sky to pull some tapes for something I was doing. It might have even been an end of season DVD. I can't remember exactly what it was. But yeah, we had to go. So I knew I had to get up at the next morning. And honestly, I feel for Chris, and this is why we're good mates, because he let me be really miserable that night. And it's like, oh God, and I was just swearing, and I don't even think there was any restaurants open on the way, was there?
No, that was it. I think Norwich had lost probably, and we were driving down the A1 and then the A17, which is bleak at the best of times. It was about 10, 11 o'clock Sunday night, and nowhere was open for a drink or anything, or even a cup of coffee. And we just got, and we love it, obviously, but there was, and then I think what from memory, what really sewed it up was we got just back to Norfolk, and then the A47 was shut.
Yeah, but then I tell you, this is the thing. We laughed by the end of it, because you when you get to that point in life when you're like really down about something, you're like, oh, I just want to get home and get to bed because I've got to get up at 6 and drive to London, and you really are just down about it so much that you get to it and you realise the one road home is closed, and I think we just laughed in the end and just went. We'll tell some people on the podcast about this one.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think taps into what we were saying earlier. It's experiences like that when someone says to you or to Rob and I, "Oh, how was the game? How was the trip to Newcastle?" you don't very often start the conversation by saying, well, in the 5th minute, Norwich won a corner and they played 4-4-2. What you say is, no, it was brilliant the day at Newcastle. Oh, 8:47 was shot on the way back. Those are the stories that make football. And that's what's missing at the moment without fans being in the ground. It's the actual tales that come alongside football that we're not getting as much of at the moment. And we've had our fair share. We've had roads closed. We've had struggles getting on air, but we've somehow muddled through every week.
Then there's 5 points like Burger Wednesday, a well-known
Burger Wednesday,
a well-known, I won't name them, but a well-known American-style restaurant, which is sort of up north. It's kind of up north, in the Midlands. They do a thing called Burger Wednesday. You can probably guess what that is. I think it's every burger a £5. So obviously, when there's an away game up north and it's Wednesday, we're like jackpot. And I think that was one of them was a Newcastle game. I think was on a Wednesday night once, and I can't remember, but we had Burger Wednesday. So that's just exciting because you get milkshakes and burgers and fries, So that kind of rough with the smooth is what I'll say.
I think we'll do this job until the day that we get Burger Wednesday and Sheffield Wednesday on the same day. The same trip.
End there, yeah.
Coverage. Just to finish off on opposite end of the spectrum, what's your best day in the job? When have you been at work and just thought this has been an absolute privilege today?
Well, we're probably going to say the same thing, aren't we? But Chris will think of something left field because he's like that.
Go on. No, you're going to talk about being on the pitch at Wembley, aren't you?
Well, of course.
Why not?
It's the greatest day of my life, I think. Wembley. I was lucky enough, Chris decided that, him and Phil were going to be up there in the doing the hard work, if you like, and I was positioned because Wembley's obviously well organised. I was positioned just behind the Norwich dugout as a sort of pitchside reporter, and I was, pinching myself. It was incredible, and to be that close to a Norwich promotion for a team that I absolutely loved as well. All the players. Not that I don't love them now, obviously, but you're talking Johnny House and you're talking good old Seb Basong, John Ruddy, Ryan Bennett, Elliot Bennett, who we both get on really well with. All these Russell Martin. Even like Stephen Whittaker. Who's a great lad. This was a great set of players and Cameron Jerome. These great players. Nathan Redmond. I'll just name them all. Bradley. You see, I didn't. Yeah, don't bring him up. He might score. No, he plays for Blackburn now. I'm sorry, I forgot. He scored against them last week. Anyway, and to just be able to run on the pitch at the end, literally, and be allowed to. And I remember Juliet Farrington from Radio 5 Live was there, and she kind of was great. She sort of, looked after me a bit because I'm like, I've never been to Wembley, but it's like this is huge for us, Norwich being at Wembley. They've not played at the new Wembley until now, etc. So she kind of said, look, all you got to do is just stay out of the way of the cameras. Make sure you stay out of the way of the Sky cameras, stay behind them, and you'll be fine. And I was, and it was great. And I ran on famously and just cuddled loads of Norwich players. There's lots of pictures of me with my arms round them, and I don't remember doing that, but I'm like literally got them in a headlock as I'm interviewing. And it's because you just want to hug someone because you've just seen your team promoted to the Premier League at Wembley. Yeah. Nathan Redmond was brilliant. He scored the goal. I was a bit indulgent and took a selfie of us that I've got up in my kitchen. Obviously, we all know what happened with Bradley. I won't go over that. And Wes was just golden because Wes was known to not be a talker. And he swore, which was fine. We got no complaints. We had to apologise, but he put the F-bomb out there. It was just magic. And I always remember, I think I can tell this story. You'll probably get away with it. I always remember I went up and did the phone in after I ran back up, and Phil had been sort of doing a great job. Chris had gone down to do the interviews, and we had Ian Holloway with us, which was great because Jamie Currens was there, and he knew Ollie, and Ollie came on our show, which is great. What a lovely bloke, brilliant broadcaster as well, lovely bloke. And I remember Chris came up and he was holding something. I've got a picture. And he's holding a little "We're going up" flag, which I'm sure he gave back after. I'm sure he gave it back to the Football League. But I've got that picture in my phone, and I always look at it when I'm feeling a bit down and think about good times, and just brilliant, and it's the best day of my life. Watching your team get promoted at Wembley and being able to run on the pitch doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, it's funny. It comes down to the fact that it doesn't really matter how well we do our jobs. We put our careers totally in the hands of Norwich City, and that's always, I think, worth remembering. People sometimes think that as reporters we we get a kick out of criticising the team, or we don't want them to do well, and that's what our mean old journalists are like. But it's we do genuinely go with the team, because I was a Premier League commentator this time last year. I'm now a Championship commentator. I've not done anything differently. It's up to the team. For us, it's great when the team's successful, when it catches everybody's imagination. You get those wonderful days in the city when everyone turns out for the open top bus parade and all of those sort of things. Those are the days that where you really do feel extra lucky to do the job that we do. So yeah. And as for that we're going up banner, well, Robert was just left on the side of the pitch. I assumed it wasn't needed anymore. So I do know where it is now.
Yeah, brilliant. But the one thing I remember about that day was the amount of pictures that people sent me of me, and I'm like, but they've got people, because I think it's great that our listeners and Norwich fans, they sort of see me, Chris, and Phil, and the rest of the team as part of them, and that's why we're so lucky to do the job we do. And me and Chris always say this: we won't do it forever. We know there'll be a day that comes when someone else comes along, and that's fine. You will be ready for that. But at this time, we are part of you guys. We're with you guys. We're with the rest of the fans, and it's great, and that's a great feeling, and that's why both of us love local radio, because you don't get that anywhere else. You are part of the team, and whether people agree or disagree with you, or like or don't like you, they can't deny that we do this because we love Norwich City. That's the main reason. It's not, and we don't want to see the club slip up. We want to see them skyrocket to the Champions League. That's the dream. Then we get European trips as well, don't we, Chris? Which would be nice one day.
Not that we need COVID out of the way first.
I was going to say, no, that would be superb. We'd all enjoy that. Jacob, before I wrap up, mate, I haven't come to you in a while. So is there anything you want to add before we end?
Just thank you both for coming on. I've actually really enjoyed listening. Like Joe said at the start, no one really listens to me anyway, so it's been great to kind of listen.
Come on.
We had a good debate, Rob. That would be good.
Here's a tip for you. Carry on with those strong opinions about Todd, Cantwell and the like, and people will listen. Don't just do it for the sake of it, like some people. Yeah. But that was good. And we had a bit of an argument, which was good fun. Good. What you need.
Yeah,
we've just shown why people don't have us on podcasts together. Because they've just got to his own podcast. They've got to his own podcast and said, we'll be on for a while.
This is the scrimmage part 2 this week. So if anyone else is watching, if you want us to come and do your podcast for you, just say we'll be happy to.
Yeah.
We'll have to have you on again, guys, and argue about something else.
No, we'll do it. But look, lads, really appreciate you asking us on. We were happy to do it, and you do a brilliant job. And I've watched a few of your YouTubes, and they've been brilliant. So keep up the good work.
Thanks very much. Thank you, guys. Thanks very much. Appreciated it.
It's been a pleasure, gents. Thanks again. Right, me and Jacob and probably Harvey will be back with a match reaction this weekend. We'll also be back if there's any more transfer business. But until then, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your week. Cheers.
Thumbs up, everyone. Come on.
Hey.
Lovely stuff.
Hi everyone, just a quick one. Canary have teamed up with FansBet, the bookmaker that is made by the fans for you, the fans. We are able to offer you an introductory offer whereby FansBet will boost your deposit by 50% up to the value of £100. To use this offer, click the link in the description below.